when all of a sudden he turns to me and goes, "You know what I expect of you?" And I didn't know where he was going. And he said, "I expect you to make good decisions and bring these guys home safely." And it was right there in that weird, awkward moment that I realized the only reason I'm getting a paycheck from the United States government today, and every day, but today, is not to run fast or do a bunch of pull-ups or shoot my gun perfect. It's to lead. It's to make good decisions. It's to balance the risk versus the mission and know when to push on risk and when to back off on risk, and know what the available resources are that we can call upon it. And at that moment, it was very applicable to a 34-year-old Navy SEAL officer in the middle of nowhere. But with the benefit of hindsight and maturity, I now realize, Jeff, that that's very applicable to all of us every single day.
After graduating from the Naval Academy, Chris Cassidy served 10 years as a U.S. Navy SEAL, leading as platoon commander of SEAL Team 3, Ground Assault Force commander in Afghanistan, and a platoon commander of SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team. After accumulating over 200 hours underwater as a pilot, navigator, and mission commander of a two-man flooded submersible SDV, Chris changed careers and became an astronaut. He went from underwater missions to walking in space for NASA. In 2009, Chris and his crew lifted off on the Endeavour to the International Space Station. He participated in the first of 10 spacewalks outside the space station to repair and install equipment. Chris's last 2 years as an astronaut were the central feature of the Disney Plus docuseries Among the Stars. He is heavily decorated with honors and awards, among them 2 Bronze Stars and a Presidential Unit Citation. On top of all that, Chris is also a licensed ham radio operator. Today, Chris serves as CEO and president of the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation and has been active on many nonprofit boards. Welcome to Bigger Than Business Podcast, Chris.
No, thanks, Jeff. Great to be with you.
Oh, it's great to have you. I've been really looking forward to this interview. First of all, thank you for your incredible service to our country.
I appreciate it. Yeah, very much.
As a Navy SEAL.
It was an honor to serve.
Yeah, well, you have quite the experience, and I've got some inside information because I am a good friend with your roommate at the Naval Academy.
Yep, I'm sure he ratted me out for all those secrets.
He did. I'm not going to bring that up.
Okay, good.
So every one of our business owner viewers is a leader in some form or fashion. But few of us are leaders in life and death situations as you've been with the Navy SEALs and with NASA. I want to dig into how you developed as a leader and what you learned along the way that our business owner listeners and viewers can relate to. So your first taste of leadership was at the Naval Academy, and your leadership responsibilities continued to grow from there. And in our conversation, that you shared that your background with me. What do you think others saw in you that they were willing to put you in ever increasing leadership positions?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. In high school, I was played 3 different sports. Small town in Maine, you could play football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and baseball in the spring. You can't do that in Texas, so you got to pick a sport. But so I was on sports teams all along, and kind of was in leadership positions my junior and senior year, and enjoyed being a captain, but more so just being a teammate. And then transitioning into the Naval Academy, the first couple of years, there's really no leadership. It's all about followership, and then they groom you to different types of leadership positions your last year. And in that role, I was my first real true taste of leading peers and subordinates was as a company commander there at the Naval Academy. And I remember feeling a little intimidated the first couple days, weeks, and then kind of settling in and realizing, I've seen good examples of how this is done, and I've seen ones that I know I don't want to be, and just kind of piecing that together and realized I just need to be the leader that I hoped I would have when I was on the other side of the formation. And that was probably the first taste of it. And then graduating and commissioned into the Navy and moving into different positions, just gleaning on each and every one of those previous experiences at different lower level leadership up the ranks.
That's a great insight into putting yourself in the position of when you were the follower, not the leader. What would you like to see in a leader? I've seen leaders get in that position and not think that way, and think it's their way or the highway, versus being empathetic to those they're working with,
Yeah.
and understanding where they are and what their mindset is.
Yeah, and the other thing I learned is don't be somebody you're not. I realized that the same leadership style doesn't work for all people and all personalities, and just be yourself and be you. And if you try to be something else that you think the unit or the organization needs, people generally see through that. And you realize, oh, this person's not, I know Chris and he's not being Chris. And that just erodes the trust and confidence, I think.
So
Yeah.
looking back is from a leadership perspective, especially for our viewers who are new leaders, just starting their journey as leaders. Any other advice you have for them? Is there anything you wish you'd done differently at all as a leader?
Anything I wish I'd done differently as a leader? Probably it's know that you're ready. Have confidence in yourself. You and I were talking about this the other day, that when you first get promoted to a new position with new expectations, or if you're an entrepreneur and you step out of the corporate paycheck to your own generated paycheck, there's some nerves there, and it's natural to have this feeling of, oh geez, am I ready to do this? The onus feels heavy. But what I would tell myself each and every one of the steps in my career that I've had that feeling is, you are ready. All of the experiences up until that point has given you the skills you need to be successful. Otherwise, person wouldn't have offered you the job, or you wouldn't feel confident to step out and do your own business, or whatever the case may be. You're ready.
So when you were first called upon to lead troops into situations where lives were at stake, is that kind of what you called upon, to have the confidence to do that? I've got to imagine that's where you have that thought of, am I ready for this?
Yeah.
I've got lives at stake here that are depending on me.
I've got kind of a funny story about this very subject, if you give me a minute or two to explain.
Absolutely.
So it was, I was a part of SEAL Team 3 in the pre-9/11 timeframe, and SEAL Team 3 was responsible to deploy to the Middle East. And we knew our platoon, SEAL platoon, was going to that part of the world around Thanksgiving of 2001. So we had done a year and a half of training and preparation to be ready to deploy. And then 9/11 happened. So we just happened to be the next unit in the breach to go. And so we found ourselves in, not right that day. We packed our gear on September 11th, but took 10 days or 2 weeks to get out of the country, and then Kuwait, and then Oman, and then Kandahar. So we're in Kandahar late in the fall of 2001, and we get assigned to this mission to go to the Afghan-Pakistan border, to this cave complex. You might have heard an area called Tora Bora. That's where the United States, we knew bin Laden was by radio frequency tracking, and we could tell where he was. And there was this cave complex that was known to harbor the enemy's stores and munitions and food and whatnot. And so that was our mission, to go to this cave complex. And generally for a mission, you got 2 days, 3 days maybe. We had 48 hours from the time we were told to do it until execution time. So during that time, it's a busy period of planning. You're standing around a table like this with maps and charts, and people are coming and going with pieces of intelligence, or the helicopter pilots come in and you coordinate things, and other ground units who might be in the area, you coordinate your communication plan. So just a lot of planning. And that 48 hours went by in a blur, and it all culminated to a brief to our boss, who was this really kind of hardcore, sort of mean guy, and known to be a tough person to brief to. But we knew that, and that caused us to really prepare and ask our own selves the same probing questions, so we'd be ready to answer his. And so the brief happens, and I gave most of it. Different people gave some parts, and at the end, hey sir, you got any more questions? No, go do it. I thought, oh my God, it's amazing, best outcome. So everybody's leaving the tent, and by the way, it's like this green army tent, 2 stringing light bulbs hanging from the thing,
just like in the movies.
Wooden benches. There's a wooden sand table up at the front with GI Joe guys, so we could move and maneuver people and practice where folks are supposed to be. No fancy PowerPoint, easel boards, maps and charts taped with duct tape to the wall. So just very basic, but very effective to do the brief. And everybody leaves. I'm the last one in there. I roll up the maps and charts and mess up the sand table. Everybody's gone. And I look at my watch. There's like a half hour till I got to be on the helicopter. And I realize I'm pretty hungry. I got to fill my canteens with water. I got to get to the bathroom, and I got to get the last little bit of gear together and get to the helicopter. So I better get busy. So I go to leave the tent to do the first item on that checklist, which is the bathroom. And the bathroom was a hole dug in the ground, a trench with 2 4x4 wooden posts over the hole and 3 automobile tires over those 2 4x4 posts, and then 3 sides of plywood to give you privacy and the open face looking at the runway. And so I walk around the plywood, and my little red lens flashlight illuminates a pair of boots. I was expecting to have the whole latrine to myself. There's a pair of boots. Up a little higher with the flashlight, a pair of naked shins. Up a little higher with the flashlight, whose face? The guy I had just briefed, our boss. And he's sitting on the middle tire. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing on the middle tire, sir? Is what I said in my head. And I also thought, can I rearrange this? Can I go get my gear, go to the canteens, back to the bathroom? And it doesn't make any sense. Sir, can I join you? Yeah, Cassidy, have a seat, Cassidy, have a seat. So I sit down, drop my trousers. Our knees are touching each other weirdly. There's a mostly used thing of toilet paper right there between our feet, and just super awkward and weird. When all of a sudden he turns to me and goes, you know what I expect of you? And I didn't know where he was going. And he said, I expect you to make good decisions and bring these guys home safely. And it was right there in that weird, awkward moment that I realized the only reason I'm getting a paycheck from the United States government today, and every day, but today, is not to run fast or do a bunch of pull-ups or shoot my gun perfect. It's to lead. Right. It's to make good decisions. It's to balance the risk versus the mission and know when to push on risk and when to back off on risk, and know what the available resources are that we can call upon. And at that moment, it was very applicable to a 34-year-old Navy SEAL officer in the middle of nowhere. But with the benefit of hindsight and maturity, I now realize, Jeff, that that's very applicable to all of us every single day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to the business owners, right? Yeah. Like, you're in that position. You've got people that can do sales. You've got people that can manage the office drama. Mm-hmm. You're the leader because you know the mission, the overall goal, strategic goal of the organization, and it's your job to get there and manage that risk. So it was a funny story and very true, but it was a very impactful lesson for me.
That's a great story, and it is definitely applicable. I was thinking about how applicable it was when you were describing it at the end of the story. The good part is I've never had to sit on a tire next to one of my colleagues with our knees touching to make that happen. Yeah, right before we're getting ready to go out on a mission. And fortunately, there are no lives at stake. But for business owners, there are families at stake. Mm. There's families' livelihoods at stake. There's people's careers at stake, their future. There's our clients and what we do for all our business owners that are listening and viewing. There's a lot at stake. Not in a way, it's not life and death, but it's really important because of the lives that we touch, and that without good leadership, or with good leadership, said a different way, we can make a big difference in these things. So that's a wonderful example. I appreciate that very much. So you're now the CEO of a large nonprofit organization overseeing a $200 million plus project, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Mm-hmm. I want you to share what's going on with the Medal of Honor Museum. But is there anything else that you learned through all this that is really helping you have the success you're having today?
Yeah, one of the things when I first stepped in, I retired from the government in 2021, 28 years as a naval officer, as you mentioned in the thing, half in the intro, half of that, or 10 years, actively doing SEALs things, and then the last half working at NASA. And then, so I've been in the civilian world now for 3 years. And early on in this role, out of the government, I realized that getting a mission done with people it's basically the same thing, whether that you can insert the blank, whatever mission is, whether it's SEAL missions, it's space flight, or raising money and managing a construction project in the Metroplex of Dallas. Now, the culture is slightly different, the age range, the mix of the people, but in general, people are people. They have needs, they have personal needs, they have family needs. You got to balance fatigue and workload and understand the pulse of your people. They all have belly buttons. They all have put their pants on every day. And it's just, I realized that leading people is just about that, people. And so that was one kind of aha moment, that it's not a whole lot different into different stages of things. And then I kind of mentioned it before, but just, well, I didn't mention this. I think that if people in the organization don't understand why the direction is chosen to go a certain way, if the company can do A, B, or C and they pick B, but A was sort of good and C was sort of good too. So from a different lens and a different perspective in the organization, A or C might be a better choice. But so I've always felt like when I was in that role and not quite understanding and feeling a little bit, well, getting that feedback and understanding the rationale from the leadership was important. And then you go, oh, okay, I get it. I didn't have that piece of information. It makes sense, and off we go.
Yeah, that's a great point, a great comment. It's one of the leader's primary roles is vision, the vision of the company, and having the right people on board that buy into and want to help pursue that vision. And a big part of that is communication and being willing to answer the questions when people do have different perspectives.
Yeah.
And actually rolling some of those different perspectives into the vision if necessary, because people can help shape things.
And the longer it goes on where people feel like their input is never of value, or they don't understand the why, it just erodes culture and morale. And then that just ultimately is worse than picking a bad direction.
So we're going down a road that really ties into my next question, or just some of the foundational things that you've built in that you think are important for any leader to build in. And these are, culture is one of the things we talked about recently in a conversation of how important culture is, and it's everything. Are there any other things that come to mind for you that just you think are foundational to having a good organization, being a good leader of an organization?
Yeah, it's all about people, right? And people's interacting with people, and how the organization encourages positive interaction among folks. For example, when I was I was a chief astronaut for a couple of years, and part of that role is to pick the crews, and then also part of that role is to manage the astronaut selection process. And it's a huge undertaking to look at thousands of applicants of all smart people who want to become astronauts and narrow it down to 10 or 15 selectees. And at some point, there's a bunch that rise to the top right away, but then at some point it gets really hard in that last 100 people to get the final number. And my big takeaway from that was, who do you want to go camping with? Who do you want to do a cross-country road trip with? Because if you select the person that by the time you're 2 exits down, you haven't even stopped for your first tank of gas yet, and you want to throw them out of the car, that's not the person you want on your team. So
you can't throw them out of the spaceship.
You can't throw them out of spaceship. So picking the right teammates is very applicable in every organization, and in small business it's even more important, because you don't have 1,000 people where one sort of problem can be tamped down just by numbers. Right. If you've got 5 people and one, that's 20% of your workforce is bad if you got one of them. So
I totally agree. I tell people culture is everything. It is absolutely everything. And that's a great example of how you do it and why it's important. Another thing that I've found to be a benefit is establishing for your culture what are non-negotiables. What are the things that you're not going to compromise no matter what. And to have people on board that have those same belief systems and values, that they're not willing to compromise it and jeopardize the culture likewise.
I'm curious your thoughts on this, Jeff. Somebody that thinks they are on board with the company culture, but has a blind spot to their own shortcomings. That I think is one of the harder ones, right?
Yes.
Have you had to deal with that?
Absolutely. And you start with communication and try and help people understand where the blind spot is. Fortunately, when you've built a culture that does represent your values, the other teammates also want to protect that culture. So they'll also interject and try and help that individual. But if that individual blind spot stays blind because they don't want to change for some reason, or they just really aren't the right fit, then you have to let them go.
Yeah.
It's just, and the sooner the better.
Mm.
One bad apple can really rot the whole barrel.
Amen.
Yeah. So I want to change gears a little bit. And interesting statistics, fewer than 55% of new businesses make it 5 years.
Wow.
Less than 35% survive for 10 years. And I can imagine the washout rate for the Navy SEALs and astronauts that you just shared is it's obviously that higher. What's the difference in mindset, or the way the ones that were successful, that made it through Navy SEAL training, the ones that became the astronauts, what's the difference in mindset and how they approached their work versus the ones that washed out?
Yeah. So SEAL training is a great area to talk about this question. The SEAL training is generally 6 months long, broken up into 3 phases. The first phase is physical fitness. Basically, the second phase is all about diving and underwater, and the third phase is land warfare tactics. And this thing called Hell Week, which a lot of people now have heard of, is the 5th week in the beginning phase. So it would be early on, but they got to get your body ready to deal with the rigors of it. It starts on Sunday, ends on Friday. It's just one big blur of stuff. And, you don't really know a whole lot about it. That's part of the mystique. Even as a student, the instructors kind of keep, they don't publish the schedule. They don't tell you what's going to happen. And you kind of know a little bit of the lore, but it's the unknown. And I think that unknowns drive anxiety, and I'm getting off my answer here, but in order to tamp down anxiety and nerves, you eliminate unknowns. That's what training does. Like you shared with me that you like triathlons. Well, how do you know you're going to be effective through the transition phase, the bike to the run? Well, you just practice it a couple times and you know where your stuff is, and then it's not unknown anymore, and you get used to the muscle memory of doing it. So there's the unknown of going into Hell Week drives up the anxiety. But so there's that. And somebody told me before Hell Week was just make it to the next meal. And I thought, what does that mean? That's crazy. But it is so brilliant, because you need a ton of calories to get through SEAL training, but Hell Week specifically. So they have to feed you or you wouldn't make it.
Right.
No matter how mentally strong you are, you just have to get the calories on board. So you're going to get to the dining hall every 3 hours or so, and then they feed you midnight rations. And so all you have to do is think about getting to the next 3 hour block. And at some point you're going to get to walk in the dining hall, fill your plate with food, hot cup of coffee, water, nobody's yelling at you. You got 10 minutes to eat and life is good. And you reset the button and off you go. And so that I think is also a really good analogy for in life or business owners. If you've got a giant task, just kind of got to break it up into chunks of time that you can manage, or chunks of activities that you can see the light at the end of that tunnel. Otherwise, it's just completely overwhelming.
That is great advice. And I know even to this day, as our business grows and certain things happen, there are times when I get overwhelmed. And what I do every time is I just sit down and I say, okay, here are the priorities. Here's the first thing I need to do. Here's the second thing. Here's the third thing. And once I get through that list, I know what priority 1 is, and I start working on priority 1. All of a sudden the anxiety's gone, because I know what I need to do. I'm now working on it. I'm not worrying about it, thinking about it. I'm doing it. And so those manageable bite-sized chunks, that's really, really good advice. And that's for any business owner in any phase of business, is is when you start to get overwhelmed, just break it down and
What do I got to do right now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. What's most important thing now?
Mm-hmm.
So every business owner faces adversity in every phase and season of their business. Few of us, though, encounter the type of adversity you've encountered where, again, lives are at stake. How were you trained to prepare for adversity? And can you provide an example of how, when you had to face adversity, how that training paid off?
Yeah, and again, this is a training. I think is the answer in general. The short answer is training helps prepare you for adversity, but the thing is, you're never going to train or simulate or even think up of the scenario that actually you'll face. But you can give yourself as many curveballs as you can in training, or in aviation, they say, work the emergencies on the ground at 0 knots and 0 altitude when you have all the time in the world and you kind of know where your hands are going to go, where your eyeballs are looking. And then when you're moving fast and you're at 10,000 feet, you've done that procedure before. So adversity is going to come in all different shapes and sizes. And I think thinking through it, we called it what ifing in the military, even if it's just lying your head on the pillow at night before you're falling asleep, or when you wake up in the morning, and just think of a couple crazy scenarios. What am I going to do if what am I going to do if my CFO leaves tomorrow? What's my plan? And you just kind of have some sort of basis to change. One quick space story on that. In 2013, I was part of a spacewalk where my buddy's spacesuit was filling with water. And
the spacesuit's not supposed to fill.
That's a bad place for water to be. He's on the inside of it. We do have a drink bag that's a Camelback size 32 ounce, so that's water. There's pee and there's sweat. Those are substances that could be in there, but the water that he had was super cold and tastes mechanical, and that the only source of that is in the backpack. But it's plumbed in such a way where the engineers and we never thought that water could get into the oxygen lines, but it did somehow. Wow. So it's filling up as oxygen coming into his helmet. Water was mixed in with the oxygen. So and the surface tension of the water drives its behavior. So the water just kind of sticks onto his head, and it started to grow around. And when I got up close to him, there was like a half of a grapefruit, half of a softball of water just jiggling like Jello on his head. And we knew this was bad. So with the ground's coordination, we all agreed, okay, let's end this. And Lucas started to go back. And in the process of translating himself back to the airlock, the motion of his own body put motion into the water, and it swished all around his eyes and his ears and his nose and his microphones. And so he couldn't hear, he couldn't talk, couldn't see. And it's a whole hour-long talk I could give just about that. But the end result is he was able to get back to the airlock, which is what you got to get back in. And I remember thinking, what do we have to do to just break even? Because, and those actual words went in my head, because things never get super good really fast, but they can get super bad really fast. Right. And so what do our actions need to be not to make this situation worse? And I think that's probably also applicable to biz. When you get that adversity, you get that curveball, okay, what are the basic stopgaps we need to do right now so that the house of cards doesn't fall all the way down? Just secure the hatches, and then bit by bit we can do the maneuvering through the ship to make sure that it's seaworthy.
And in this story, he got in there.
Yeah, he got in. I remember also thinking the only thing that mattered is closing the hatch, and because if we couldn't close the hatch, you couldn't get air moving. If you don't get air moving, we can't get his helmet off, because you need pressure to get the helmet off safely. Right. And if we don't get the helmet off, he's going to drown. So the only thing that mattered, I remember thinking, and his feet were by my head and I was doing the hatch, and I remember almost getting annoyed at his feet, not really annoyed, but just like, get your feet out of my way. I got to close the hatch. Because not caring about that.
Right. That was the most
the only thing that mattered was closing the hatch. Yeah. And then we could get situated and move our feet.
That's great advice. And it reminded me of a couple things. One, there was when you were talking about anticipating adversity, there was a study out of Harvard in the 90s, and it was about the traits of successful business owners, common traits to the most successful business owners have. One of them was the ability to anticipate, the ability to anticipate the future, always thinking ahead, always thinking through the what ifs. And that's probably what every viewer or every listener that is a successful business owner does regularly. So your explanation kind of made me understand when you're talking about planning, but things don't always go as planned, and you can't prepare for everything. And then, so how does that planning, how do you use that planning to make the decisions you have to make? Help me understand Eisenhower's quote that said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." So what you just explained helped me understand that quote a lot better. Fill us in on what's happening with the Medal of Honor Museum.
Oh yeah, it's exciting. We've been under construction for a little over 2 years. We broke ground in March of 22, and we'll open the doors for the American public. It happens to be here in the Metroplex, but it's for the United States of America. In March 25th actually is opening day of next year. So what is that, 8 or 9 months from now? And part of it is of our project is sort of threefold. The bricks and mortar museum, focusing on the stories. It's really a biographical museum of people. You can go to New Orleans and learn about World War II. There's an amazing museum there. You can go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and see planes of all stock kinds, and other places to see tanks and jeeps. This is about people, normal people who did something extraordinary when the country needed them to do it. So that's the museum. And then we realized too that building leaders and building a future folks of character is really important for our country right now. And so how do we use these stories of the Medal of Honor stories and those of sacrifice and courage to inspire character-driven leadership, courage, sacrifice, patriotism, commitment, integrity. And so we've established a leadership institute both for K through 12, but we're focusing on 8th grade right now. I think that's a good age to start at. And we're electronically, with the partnership of the NFL, in classrooms last school year, about 27,000 classrooms with their character playbook. And then in local ISDs, Arlington and a few others, we're doing a week-long module in the fall for 8th graders, and then that'll be part of their field trip when they come. So
wow, that is awesome.
Rolling all that out, and then there's adult programs as well, from a three-day, 1-day, half-day programs that people can participate in.
And will you expand that nationally in the schools? Hopefully,
that's our goal. Tackling education is a humongous task, so we're just doing it bit by bit, and starting with 8th grade right now locally, and we'll spend probably within 2 years. Texas and Florida, actually, in their state education verbiage in the code or whatever, it has a line there that students will learn a little bit about the Medal of Honor.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So those two states, it's easy. I want to say easy, but the path is there for us because it's already in the part of the education system. So we'll start there, and then the third and final part of our project is a monument on the National Mall in DC. Cool. And that will break ground and begin construction after we open this museum. We don't want to be dealing with two construction zones at the same time. So.
Well, I'm grateful, and I was blessed to have a tour of the Medal of Honor Museum in Arlington, Texas, under construction. You gave my colleague Ryan Stolt and I a personal tour.
Yep.
Which it's just incredible. The architecture is stunning. It's going to be an amazing facility. It's right across the way from Dallas Cowboys Stadium and the Texas Rangers Stadium. It's in a perfect location, right in the center of the Metroplex. Of course, you can fly into DFW from anywhere. So I really commend the
and a lot of
I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's going to be one of the greatest gifts to the Metroplex.
Yeah, we're excited. And as you saw, there's a lot of event space in there. We can accommodate up to about 400 people, seated, plated kind of dinner. We've got a 230-person theater. We've got different rooms for breakout type sessions if your company wants to have a board meeting there. So that's a big part of our business plan as well, is making it available for the DFW community to have events there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and by the way, I have served on boards where people fly in from other places to meet in a central location, and the Medal of Honor Museum, when it's completed, will be a great place, a
Right.
unique place for companies to come and have meetings from anywhere.
Absolutely.
And again, the meeting that's genius to have the extra meeting space in the event space. I think that's going to be great. 'Cause the setting, again, the architecture is going to be stunning. The story is obviously incredible, and I think it's something everybody's going to enjoy.
MLB All-Star Game is in Globe Life Field next Tuesday, and they're right now, tomorrow opens what they call All-Star Village. And so that whole area around Mark Holt's Lake, which is the little lake on the north side of Choctaw Stadium, from there all the way to the whole entertainment district basically is part of All-Star Village, and our museum has got different components to it. So we're excited to be all.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
You'll get a lot of people viewing.
Yeah.
You'll get a lot of interest built up.
Yeah.
I want to encourage anybody listening or watching to when it gets open to go. You'll be very, very impressed with it, and you'll walk away really proud of our country.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
So I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. You got a $200 million plus building you're working on, and all these other projects you mentioned. You got a lot going on. But I just, I'm grateful for you to carve the time out and come allow us to have this conversation. I want to ask you one last question. It's a question I ask everybody that I interview. And Chris, what's bigger than business for Chris Cassidy?
Bigger than business for Chris Cassidy is not letting down the people that I love and work, teammates and family. I grew up in New England, and Bill Belichick's was the Patriots football coach, and he's famous for saying, just block your guy, just do your job.
Yeah.
And in anything I've done, whether in SEALs here or at NASA, I have this innate fear of the mission not happening because I didn't do my part. I don't want that to be the case. So for me, that's bigger than me is my loved ones, not letting down my loved ones, not letting down my teammates, not letting down my colleagues.
That's awesome. That's all. And I can see that in you as I've gotten to know you and how intentional you are about everything you do and how seriously you take everything. I appreciate that about you.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jeff.
for being on the show.
My pleasure.